Okay, we are finally here to do the Q&A panel for Vivisect. I am super excited because I have yet again another student filmmaker who are some of my favorite people in the world. So what I'd first like to do is have Ava and Caitlin introduce themselves to the audience.
Awesome. So I can go first. My name is Ava. I am the writer and director of Vivisect. I'm currently a senior film major at the University of Connecticut. And I've been really, really interested in working in the horror genre throughout my time at UConn. Particularly have a lot of interest in the relationship between horror and women. And I had an absolute blast working on this film. I loved working with an entirely female cast and crew to put it together as well, which I was really excited about. And yeah, this was my first larger scale short film ever. So I was really excited with how it turned out.
Thank you for that. Okay, Caitlin.
Hi, I'm Caitlin. I'm a recent graduate from the University of Connecticut as well.
Mhm.
I have been an actor in the theater for like 12 years. This was my first time getting to act on screen, and I'm very thankful to Ava for like trusting me with the role of Margaret. It was such a incredible experience, and getting to see the final product, getting to watch people watch it is really fantastic, and I'm just really glad to have been a part of it.
That's awesome. Thank you very much for that. Okay, Ava, I want to start off with asking a good question. When you look at doing film for the very first time, I imagine it's probably frightening and thrilling, and there's all sorts of emotions and details that go to you, and especially when you're a student. So, what was for you the biggest challenge and the biggest positive about doing a film for the first time?
So the biggest challenge was really the time constraint, because this was the final assignment for my narrative short film production class last semester.
Yeah.
So we had about a month ish to work on this film, like from conception through the final cut. And so we were confined to 2 days to shoot this whole film. And by 2 days, I mean like 2 evenings because we were shooting it outside of class hours. Um, but it really was an awesome experience to finally work with an actual like crew of people. It was still like a micro crew. It was a very small number of people working on this film. But it was my first time working with like a director of photography. Haley Madrimudu was the one who shot the film. And it really changed my perspective on how I make my films because I had previously worked on a couple of shorter projects for other classes and things, but everything had been shot by myself, and that's not necessarily like my focus as a filmmaker. Meanwhile, it is her focus as a filmmaker, so it was really interesting to see how it feels to collaborate with somebody who really knows what they're doing behind the
Mhm.
camera. Um, but yeah, I think that the biggest challenge was just getting everything done within the time constraint that we had and within the limits of like location that we had. Um, the final version of Vivisect looks very different than the original script, because we were confined to the campus and we were confined to a certain amount of like hours and time, and there was like zero budget. So actually just like coming together and making everything get done within like the very restrictive scale of the film was probably the biggest challenge.
Thank you for that. Now, Caitlin, as I understand it, you have a degree in English literature. So I want to ask a question because I myself am a fellow writer. Number one, I want to ask what you're going to do with that degree is and what do you think the ultimate career goal is for you? And number two, if I were to ask you about what you believe writing and the written word, what does it mean to you?
Yeah, with my degree, I really hope to be a published writer. That's like long-term end goals to have a book published. I'm really into fantasy, and my minor was in history, so really implementing like historical fact and interweaving it with like magic, with like fantastical characters is really like a niche interest of mine. I like taking unknown or lesser known historical events and like, oh, how could they have been made fantastical, or how could we explain these things that have happened in interesting or entertaining ways? And I really just love literature as a form of just, this sounds bad, but like an escape, like having
Okay.
it this other world where you can fully dive into, you can cozy up, and you can just transform into a place and you can teach yourself things, you can learn new things through these other worlds. And sorry, I had a sentence and I lost it, but I just really like the way of teaching in a way that where you don't know that you're being taught, where you're just, oh, they're dragons, oh, they're using magic. And when you finish it, you think back on it and you realize that you've learned really good lessons. You learned about a different viewpoint that you really hadn't thought of before, but the whole time you just were having fun and going on this really cool adventure. And I just love how reading can do that and unintentionally teach you and change your viewpoint on things.
Thank you for that. Okay, Ava, back to you. I have a question about the horror genre because I know you prefer to be in that area. Not my favorite, and I'm here to tell you at 56, the way horror looked back in the days of like The Omen and Michael Myers is way different than horror is now. So if I were to ask you, horror seems to have a hard time getting picked up, seems to have a hard time finding a following. What are your thoughts on that? And do you think that could evolve in 2026 at all?
I think it absolutely could evolve. I think that we've kind of been experiencing a bit of a horror renaissance lately. And obviously with films like Sinners coming out and
Yeah.
being this kind of like awards like titan in this season, I think you can really see there's a little bit more respect, a little bit more like um artistry going into some of the horror films that we're getting. But also I think that it's just really the perception of the genre rather than the actual like nature of the genre. I think that horror is uniquely equipped to um, be a tool for social commentary. I think that it's uniquely equipped to tell a lot of different stories and execute a lot of different themes in a way that's very accessible, in a way that's very vivid for people to experience. And I think that sometimes it gets overlooked as like as serious of a film genre as you might get from like a typical drama or another kind of film. Um, just on the sense that it is horror. Um, but I mean, you look at some of the horror films that came out recently. Like I personally last year, I really loved The Substance. I think that it was a really interesting way of taking on that commentary about like women's bodies and
Yeah.
aging, and it was a really fun watch and it was really cool, and they did a lot of really fun effects and it was interesting, and I thought that that was really engaging. And then I found that that was a bit of a hot take amongst some of my peers in like my classes and everything, and I never really understood why horror can get a lot of flack sometimes just on the nature of it being horror. um, I think that because as humans we deal with fears every single day, um, it's very it's a very good frame to play into natural human experiences and express those on screen. And it's a really great way of personifying threats. You can use your horror monster or your horror villain
Mm.
as a way of personifying a lot of those. I mean, trauma has been done a lot, but like Smile was extremely popular and successful, and that
Mhm.
is playing off of the role of trauma and mental health in people. So I find it doesn't get the recognition that it deserves sometimes as a vessel for communicating themes and communicating human experiences. Um, I particularly have spent a lot of time thinking about its relationship to women just because it has such a tumultuous relationship historically.
Mhm.
I had a really cool opportunity to do a video essay on any topic that I wanted to in one class, and I just used it as a chance to really dig into the development of like the final girl. So seeing where she came from to where she's kind of being represented now and the development of that has been really interesting. I also think that coming from the perspective of a woman, I have a little bit more of a framework to deal with that when I'm doing my horror films than trying to deal with other experiences. So obviously, like dealing with my own experiences, it's a little bit easier to find that voice in my films. Um, but yeah, I don't know. I think that just overall, it's a really, really interesting genre that can sometimes be overlooked as uninteresting or unthought provoking or unintellectual. When really it can be so much more than that if people care to look at it.
Hmm. Interesting. I want to take it a step further because, of course, we just watched a short film called Quarantine, which one of the tags on it is horror, actually. So, how would you interpret Quarantine? Would you say that that's more of a modern day horror? Would you throw that as more of a thriller? Just get wanting your thoughts.
I think sometimes things can get bogged down a little bit by titles of like genres, trying to box something into like one specific genre. I had a professor once who was like, I want you to label these only with one genre. I don't like when people say like with a slash in it, so like horror thriller or something like that.
Sure.
Um, I think that because quarantine is playing into fears that we have all experienced, given like the COVID-19 pandemic, I think that it could very well could be considered horror. Um, I think that its main goal is to play into that experience that we've all gone through, um, and the main experience that the characters are feeling is fear. So I think that you could very well argue that it is a horror film. Um, I thought it was very interesting seeing how, and this has come out a couple different times. There are some really cool movies that have come out of the pandemic because it is such a unprecedented experience. So I
Mhm.
think it's really interesting seeing how different artists have interpreted that experience and have brought it to screen or music or even just like visual art. Um, so I thought that was a really interesting take on the quarantine experience. Assuming that it is about COVID, I think that it is. I would be surprised if it was completely uh, separated from that. But I mean, also you think about like zombie films. Zombie films have been around forever, and it's kind of the same fear, that same like intangible villain that you can't really control, and that like once it gets you, you're done. Um, I think that it's kind of in the same box as that.
Thank you very much for that. Okay, Caitlin, you're up. I know that both you and Ava have attended the University of Connecticut, and so I'm always interested to pick the brain of students, especially when you have particular universities. Tell me a bit about the environment there, and then also tell me, do you think it's very enriching for artists as a whole by being there?
Yeah. UConn is a very, I would say it's a special school in the fact that it's a huge campus, but it is solely UConn. Stores, Connecticut is like its own little town. So it does feel very like homey. It doesn't like you're not interweaved with a city. Like everyone there is UConn. You run into classmates, friends on the streets, at restaurants. So I think it's very unique in that way where it is just its own little town, its own little like village of all these students. And it was lovely just being able to be in that environment constantly at work, at school, at restaurants. Like you were always surrounded by your fellow students. And specifically with like the arts, I feel like there's a lot of potential for students to come together and make these groups in order to put on shows. I know me and Ava were a part of Page to Stage Productions, which is a completely student-led theater group, and we were both on executive board. We both directed shows and acted in shows there, and it was just we received from funding from the school, funding from our own shows, and we were able to put on really great work and just build this community of artists, not just actors, but directors, writers, costumers. Like it was just a huge environment and a really close-knit group of people. And I'm just really grateful that I got to meet Ava through that group and a bunch of other artists and got to work with them whilst attending UConn. It was really great.
That sounds lovely. Absolutely. Okay, back to you, Ava. I have another question. I have read before that you have a passion for animation. Obviously, this is not an animated film, clearly. However, do you plan to either start creating more animated films or in the future maybe utilize that technology more?
I think I would like to. It takes a lot of time in a different way than film does.
Yeah.
I've found most of my animated projects, one of the benefits has been that I can do it entirely by myself. Um, so while film is such a community, I found that animation is more of like a solo game.
Yeah.
I have a couple of animated pieces that I really enjoyed, but I don't think that I'm polished enough yet with a lot of my animations to be putting them out, like publishing them, trying to go for festivals or anything. I still think I'm very much learning, but I do think it's a really fun art form, and I've had a lot of fun experiencing it and learning and growing as an animator.
Thank you. Okay, Caitlin, question relative to the acting, because you had mentioned getting into acting and that it's not like you were an expert at this and been doing this for a very long time. So stepping into these shoes for the first time, how much of yourself would you say you brought to your character? And second of all, do you feel like this is something that you will continue to want to do?
I definitely think it's something I will want to do. I was very lucky with this character because we had a lot of the same struggles of like just the uncertainty of the future and trying to like find that right path for yourself.
Hmm.
So it was easier to step into that role and to kind of really dig into like her insecurities and just that desperate attempt to reach out and find some sort of like clear path, clear direction. But also being able to like bring myself to a space where I'm experiencing these horrible things as we see what she goes through towards the end of the film. And it was just really interesting getting into that mind space. I'd done a couple of roles like that on the stage as well, and
Yeah.
it's always just very different in film because obviously it's a lot smaller. There's a lot of like mic small twitches on your face and really more personal with the camera. So it was interesting trying to balance that build of emotion, but also keeping it realistic because on the stage everything is a lot more exaggerated.
Yeah.
So it's something I definitely want to keep doing. And I just felt like it was a slightly different branch of acting that I really enjoyed getting into.
Very nice. That's awesome. Okay, one final question for both of you ladies. First, Ava, I thought it was really interesting that you have been a summer camp counselor before. Kudos to you on that. I think that's one of the coolest things you can do. I try to counsel as much as I can, career counseling, that is, but I think it's awesome that you lend your times to things like that. But I had read, I don't know if you still do this. Are you still doing the film critic thing for the Devil's Advocate?
That that was my high school
Okay.
newspaper. So
Ah,
I
okay.
haven't been so I haven't been associated with Devil's Advocate since 2022. But I
Okay.
think it was a really good stepping stone in my love for film and getting me to where I am today.
Do you think you'd go on to do that? Like do professional, let's say, writing as far as film review?
I don't know if that is I would, I think. I don't think that's necessarily the goal. I'm not seeking that opportunity out anymore.
Okay.
But I did have a lot of fun doing it. It is a situation where sometimes there's like a I've found that there's like a very specific narrative being pushed about certain films, like everybody agrees on them or something that I have
Mm,
felt very differently too. So I don't know necessarily if I'm super about the film critic space. Just because I don't know that I would be I don't know. I don't know if that's necessarily the direction that I would go, just because I feel like it's like your reviews sometimes are liked based off of the general sentiment about a film sometimes.
okay.
And I don't know. I do enjoy it, but it might be more of a thing just to talk with my friends about films afterwards than
That's okay
writing.
too. Absolutely. And as far as you, Caitlin, as we had talked about, you have a love of the English language. So it begs me to ask the question, do you envision yourself ever writing even just a short film or a stage production? And if so, what do you think we need in 2026 from a student voice?
I definitely like to dabble in script writing a lot for the stage. Um, I'm trying to think. I really want to probably dabble. I like it's similar to Ava in the horror, but I really like a good murder mystery. And I've
Oh,
really wanted to nail down like my own really good murder mystery, kind of like Clue-esque of like just the really campy, really like
hmm.
big costumes, big theater like style. So I think that's what I would personally try to do. I think it's always fun. I think it's something that everyone really enjoys and it can invite audience participation. It just opens up a lot of doors for a really cool production.
Yeah, good thoughts there. I guess I haven't watched a good mystery in quite a while. So you're more the Knives Out kind of girl, I'm gathering.
I
Okay.
just watched the new one, and that's exactly what has inspired like the
Aha.
recent.
Got it. Okay, awesome. So, Vivisect, we have this beautiful 11 plus minute production that was shot. Let's talk about this first. Shooting in a school. So, I don't get a chance to talk to a ton of people who have done specific shooting within the school. So, if you were to tell me, um, is it really that difficult? I would imagine it's probably easier because you have so much space. And I'm gathering this is at nighttime, so there isn't any noises per se, usually like during the day, but I could be mistaken. Was it rough? And you're giggling. So oh no.
So, it was fine for the most part. During our second shoot day, because we were starting after classes ended, we didn't start until like 6 o'clock at night.
Sure.
And our second shoot day went way late into the wee hours of the night. I think we were there until like 2 probably. Um, but at a certain point at night, the janitorial staff has to come in.
Mm,
And so, we were trying to do the blood effects at the end of the film without making any mess at all because I was really stressed out that we were going to stress them out.
yeah.
I have so much respect for the people who clean our campus. And I was like, we're leaving this better than we found it. We're not getting blood on the floors. But like at one point we had to switch floors in the middle of shooting the final like chase sequence because they had to mop or there was I think they took out like a buffer at some point for the bottom floor that was making a really loud noise. And they were like scrubbing the floor with this loud machine like 2 floors down, but you could hear it echo through the whole building. Um so really like the actual space itself wasn't that much of a confinement, but and I think it looked really cool. It's a really cool classroom building that they have. um that's why I wanted to shoot there, but it was like it's still like an active classroom building, so you still have to work around the fact that other people are there to do their job and that
Yeah.
you just have to like work with their schedule and work around what they need to get done. Um So really that was the main hiccup that we encountered when we were trying to do the work, was just making sure that we weren't imposing on them
Sure.
while still getting what we needed.
Now, did you happen to have restrictions? Because I know this was your junior year project. So usually a school or whoever is defining this will come to you and say certain rooms, only so long, only so much cast. So was it confining in terms of actual spatially where you could film this?
Um, I mean, so the film department itself is not too present on campus, I would say. So there's not a huge like knowledge of what we do or what we need around
Okay.
campus. So this was really just like a communication that I had with the chemistry department. I was like, "Hey, can we film in the classroom in the hallway after school hours?" And they were like, "There's no issue with that as long as it's after school hours and the classroom isn't being used." We were like, "Cool." So there wasn't a ton of like actual restriction as to like how long we could be or like what we were doing. But I also don't know like that they were picturing what we were going to be doing. And I don't think that they were anticipating us to stay that late either.
Sure.
Which is also why we were trying to be like so careful, like not to mess with anything and be very
Yeah.
respectful of their time. Um, because like also I don't think we were planning on being there that late either. Um, but we didn't have any additional shooting days available just because Haley had to shoot another film that week as well for the same class. We were all
Got it.
shooting the same week. Um, so I think it's really just like UConn, like the other departments, they don't entirely know what it is that we're doing a lot of the time. But they're very open to working with us. I know for my latest film, we were working with the history department in one of their buildings, and they were
Okay.
very accommodating. They were very kind with us, letting us use their space and everything. So these departments, I think they are very open to working with us, and they want to be facilitating to us. It's just I don't think that they 100% know what we're doing.
I understand. Now, Caitlin, because your counterpart is not here, clearly, you obviously have two main characters in this film. Caitlin's character is one of them. Haley is the other, of course. So tell us a bit about working with her, and then also Were you formulating a relationship before the set? Because the chemistry seemed to match well, and especially if you've got somebody who's ultimately getting physical with you, I would think you might want to know them a little bit before you do that, yes?
Yes, we had known each other from Page to Stage Productions, actually. So I
Oh,
had gotten to work with her before in another show, and of course, there's a bunch of like off time when we're not shooting. So while they were setting up a camera or setting up a light, the two of us would be able to just sit and talk and kind of laugh about the like hilarity of the situation of just I'm sitting there in a sports bra covered in blood and we're just chatting it up. So it was really just this such a unique experience that we both were really able to laugh with each other and just have like late night conversations just while they were off setting up cameras, putting the sheets like under us so that we could splatter the blood. So it was really, really nice to have that time to really get comfortable with her so that we could work together and put together such a good film.
very nice. Well, and the thing too is I think your characters, both of you seem to have similarities, yes, but I see distinct personality differences between the two of you. Would it be fair to say that the real versions of yourself are that opposite, or?
Actually, no, we are very similar, like interest wise, very similar, kind of in like been told we kind of are like share similar vibes.
Ha,
So it was really interesting to see just this switch in like us chatting, laughing to her getting into like this really serious, like evil character.
yeah.
So it was really, really cool to see that work from her.
I imagine. And I want to ask about this question because there's a point in the movie, and so I'm trying not to give too much away because, of course, if I do, then people won't want to watch it, of course, because they'll know. So you have some versions of special effects at the very end. There's a fight scene that goes on, and that particular special effect, the sound in particular, how did you manage to accomplish that? Because that was well done.
So, the sound was entirely assembled in post. There's several different sound effects that were layered. There was like, I think there was cabbage in there. There was like some metal sound. So obviously the item is metal. So I think pretty much from the moment when she starts using the weapon to the end of the film, all of that is completely ADR and completely like separate. Because also
Hmm.
we didn't want to do any sort of screaming around the janitors either. um, so we were pretty much all of that sound is completely in post. Because also we didn't have like much in the ways of like stunt performers or stunt weapons
Yeah.
or anything like that. So I didn't want that to be like I didn't want anybody to be in any sort of real danger. We did have a dummy head for one shot when we actually like when she actually gets hit in the head.
Yeah.
So I do still have that dummy head somewhere. I don't know where it is right now, but we do have the dummy somewhere. But it was really just like a matter of layering a couple of different sounds and trying to match what that would have sounded like.
Sure.
Because that weapon came nowhere near anybody's actual head.
I got it. Okay. To those that may not know this, the actual definition of vivisect is to dissect a living body for experimental purposes. So, was this intentional? Meaning that's pretty sophisticated and even above this writer's head. I was like, dang, that's really good. She actually is onto something. Or was there another meaning to this?
Yeah, so it was coming pretty literally in the fact that they were studying for a chemistry class in like in a science building and things like that, like where you might expect there to be some sort of dissection. But also like that was the intention that was going to be the ending for this character. I'm worried about spoiling things. Um, but yeah, so the Vivisect is very, very different than the original version of the film. The original version of the film, like the first ever script that I wrote, was set completely in the woods. So there was a big tonal shift when I changed it to this kind of classroom setting. And our antagonist is really focused on the biology of a person and the way that the human body comes together in like an artistic way, and they have this deep need to engage with that. So their intentions fully going into this were to dissect the other character completely alive.
Sure.
Um, hence the name Vivisect. In the original version, it was more of a most dangerous game situation, where it was more from like a hunting perspective. But I tried to maintain the predator prey dynamic because that was a big
Yeah.
point in the script's design.
Sure. Now, for you, Caitlin, you obviously, I'm guessing, aren't a professional stunt person. Neither was your cohort, obviously. So here you are, you're going into this film, and now she's saying to you, yeah, so just so you know, it's going to get a little complicated and there's going to be some struggling scenes, etc. So, how comfortable were you with doing stunts, if you will, for lack of a better term? And also, how much practice went into something like that?
It was definitely something that I had to ask Ava to be patient with as I like got the got a hold of doing the motions and especially oh no, I don't want to spoil, but some of the other movements towards the end
Yes.
um were just hard to fake but also make look like real and like with
Oh, sure.
force.
Yeah.
So it was definitely a learning experience. And again, those like off times when the camera's not on was just going over it and just going to myself, like, all right, I'm gonna do this, and then I have to do this, and remind myself to do this. But because of the short time constraint of like the entire filming, I think we probably spent about an hour just blocking it, maybe hour
Okay.
45 minutes. So it was a quick learn, but I'm really glad that Ava trusted me with it. And I think it looks pretty great in post.
Yeah, I would say so, definitely. Um, so I want to ask you about the story itself. When I look at this, one of the things that stands out to me is I feel like your antagonist actually is almost in some ways more insecure than your protagonist. I also have to point out that while you both are strong females, the two characters in the film are very strong. They also are both very empty in ways, missing something that the other brings to the other person. And I think Vivisect is really a story about finding identity, facing one's fears, and moreover, trying to figure out what the next step is for both of these characters. I could see it actually being another, frankly, I could see one of these characters going on to a larger production. Is that in the works? Do you have any ideas about maybe adding on to Vivisect?
I don't know if there is a feature or anything like in the future right now.
Sure.
Um, I do kind of like the concept of doing the original version someday. Um, there still would need to be some tweaks to the original. The original version was set in the forest on like a through hiking trail. So they were a little bit more isolated in the context of the forest.
Yeah.
And there was more of a dynamic of just Mother Nature in it,
Okay.
which I really did like about the initial design for the film. So I can see myself potentially making that version and seeing like how that compares. But I do really like these characters, and I wouldn't mind exploring something bigger with them. Um, but that wouldn't be like that's not like a near future thing. That would be probably further down the road.
I kind of figured that was the case. And of course, because of the reality of filmmaking and because you are not a Hollywood studio, anytime there's a bit of blood, and I hear that there's some blood in this film, that it requires doing something to create it. And because you don't have a huge budget, I'm guessing any helpful hints to student filmmakers on how to make blood easily and believable?
So my blood mixture was corn syrup and food dye
Aha.
mixture, and then when it came to any sort of chunkier stuff, there was mashed banana in it. Um, but primarily it was that food coloring corn syrup combo.
Okay, gotcha. That sounds pretty typical from what I hear. Um, so if I were to ask you guys both, because you're an actor and you're the creator, if I gave you just two sentences to describe this film to everyone, what would you say it is? What is Vivisect to you? And they're both silent. That does not help our situation. We got to give them something,
I'm
folks.
thinking Vivisect is an exploration of natural instinct in fight or flight, um, and how that can present itself in women as they enter a different phase of their life.
Okay, I can live with that. And Caitlin, any thoughts there?
That was better than mine. But I was gonna say Vivisect is coming of age story set in the most extreme conditions.
Hmm, not bad. Okay. Now, if people happen to watch this today, now that they've been hearing all about this movie, are they going to get a chance to see it in another city, in another place?
I'm not entirely sure what's next, as far
Okay.
as screening. Eventually, I imagine that it will be available somewhere to stream, and that information will be available on my website when it is. Though I would like to screen at other places. This is its first real screening anywhere, so that was really exciting. So we'll see where it continues on in its life cycle. But otherwise, it will be eventually made visible somewhere, which will be linked on my website.
I gotcha. And so I want to ask both of you, what projects do you have upcoming? Do you have another film in process, another stage production? What's going on next for you?
I do want to pass the torch to Caitlin really quick, just
Sure.
because she does have to leave.
Yeah, I currently do community theater throughout Connecticut. Right now, I'm in a cabaret at Cirillo Summer Theater in Windsor. We do a winter cabaret and a show in the summer. And yeah, that's the next production I have coming up.
Okay. And before I forget to ask you, Caitlin, if people want to reach out to you or find you on social media or otherwise, where can they do so?
Yeah, I'm on Instagram. My handle is KAITMN8.
Okay.
Mostly Instagram is the social media that I use.
Gotcha. Okay. And as for you, Ava, what's coming up next?
Awesome. So I'm currently working on my senior thesis film, which is a paranormal horror short film titled Jenny. We just wrapped production about a week ago, or principal photography. We're going to do some reshoots in the spring semester. But this film is focusing on a college student who finds a haunted ring that she uses to communicate with the spirit of her classmate to solve her murder. Um, I am really excited about it. It's exploring themes of power dynamics and violence against women, as well as the main character dealing with internalized misogyny and her journey with this spirit girl. And I've just been really excited seeing how things are turning out. I got the first rough cut, like, of what we have shot assembled a couple days ago, which is a super exciting stage for me. So I'm excited to see that come
Very,
together.
very cool. Love that. Okay. Thank you. And if people want to find you on social media, Ava, where can they do so?
Yes, so my Instagram handle is Ava Elizabeth, so that's AVAELISABETH _
Okay.
I have a personal website, which is avadelorfano.com, AVADELORFANO.com. That's where I put all of my work up. And there's some bio and contact information on there as well.
That's awesome. Well, ladies, thank you very much for this. I'm so very honored that you brought this project to me to be able to screen for the very first time. I'm very proud of this work. I'm also very happy about hearing about the nomination, which is exciting. And I wish you nothing but luck as far as tonight and hope everything goes well for you.
Thank you so much.
Oh,
Thank you.
absolutely. Anytime.